White folks are not like us. You are looking back to 1965 to try to figure out who killed Malcolm. White folks are already plotting 2050. That's a big difference. You cannot defeat somebody looking backwards when they're already plotting 2050. They already know, according to their methods, what you're going to be doing in 2050. Exactly how many of you will be here in 2050. If you want to undo your situation, you got to go to 2,100 right now and get ahead of them. If you are behind, you got to score more points. Am I right? In order to get ahead. So that's our predicament now. They are not looking backwards. They had already figured out 1992 in 1962. Reason we don't discuss policy because we don't have any policy. What is our policy on trade? None. You talk about a trade deficit, we're it. 95 cents of every dollar leaves our community in 24 hours. You talk about an economic imbalance. We're it. What are we doing to correct our economic imbalance? Nothing. What kind of central banking system do we have? None. What kind of trade are we engaged in? None. What markets do we control? None.
The fact that the Negro absolutely refuses to do for himself is mind-boggling. I've been trying to figure this thing out now for a while, but to no avail. One obstacle I found is that Negroes consider themselves as royal Americans and not black, though blacks in America and the American are two different entities where one is in power and the other is powerless. This virtually means that one is colonized and the other is a colonizer. Those who make profession and money by playing on the emotions of black people, screaming futile invectives, denunciations of racism, preaching divestment and gender war, will continue to do so and should be discarded from the black culture altogether. Why do I say that? Because the present course of things are easy. Mass meetings, big conventions, protest resolutions, and countless nonsensical YouTube videos for mental masturbation all leads nowhere. But to get down to the real persistent and hard work of actually doing something that takes sacrifice and resolve, you'll find that Negroes will quickly separate, disperse, and retreat. I'll talk about so-called black power because empty rhetoric and a utopian dream like Wakanda. Either the blacks in America or Africa will unite amongst themselves or the other. In the Afro-American context, we are suspicious of our own race. During chattel slavery, blacks on the plantation were taught to watch other blacks and tell all that they did to the overseer or the master. This was slavery's native detective force to discover incipient insurrection. This kind of training led to traitors in numerous black organizations and power figures, from Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, and Fred Hampton. I call this the Judas Priest effect. But this kind of thing isn't a new phenomenon. In fact, it's quite historic. In African history, the blacks were always in a state of paranoia, fear, and distrust of other Africans. But why? Because they were always engaging in conquest, theft, and enslaved armies for themselves, Arabs, and Europeans. A few years ago, I made a post that listed hundreds of black organizations. Though all these organizations exist, the black condition continues to decline. Not only that, but all individual black organizations are powerless against white power. What white power fears the most is black unity. I believe that this is a well-known fact among them. Why don't these organizations unify under one umbrella for the advancement of the race and not the race members in the organization? The same reason why African states won't unify to solve their problems. Ego. Our people have a vindictive attitude towards our own by being forgiven to other races. I found this behavior dating back thousands of years, not just post-slavery. One theory is that it's not because they are poor, ignorant, and oppressed as a mass that there is no such sympathy of thought and unity of effort among them as among Jews and Irishmen the world over. But because the variation of blood beyond the honorable restrictions of law has destroyed, in large measure, the pride of ancestry upon which pride of race must be built. In no other logical way can we account for the failure of the Afro-American people to stand together as other oppressed races do and have done for the writings of wrongs against them authorized by the laws of several states, if not the federal constitution, and sanctioned or tolerated by public opinion. In the last week alone, I've seen more nonsense on who Negroes should vote for, more than I have seen about unity and race organization in the past 4 years that I've been on Facebook. We've got a problem. Why is it that our race absolutely refuses to do for themselves and unite, but insists on hat in hand begging of whites to solve our problems and the race problem? Is unity and race survival planning so great a task that it's impossible for them to even think about, so they rely on whites to do it for them? Do they disdain and distrust our race so much that they, quote, leave it to the white people? The scramble for colonial benevolence is getting redundant. The American blacks believe that we have power at the table of politics. But if politics is the ruling class's struggle over power, money, and land, how then can blacks play a hand when they have no land, no resources, no industry, and no power other than a march and a vote? Nevertheless, I have to agree with Chancellor Williams when he said that if we fail to accept the challenge of solving our own problems at this critical turning point in history, we have proved ourselves unworthy of having descendants, and our own names should be forgotten by them or cursed by the farthest generation. So since the Afro-American cannot organize, how then can we have Pan-Africanism if it is defined as a global movement that aims to encourage and strengthen the bonds of solidarity and unity to overturn white power? Some even say that the Afro-American should exodus to Africa. It is erroneous to believe that the Afro-American will ever leave the U.S. because they believe that we built the country and they don't want to give all that they gave to the country away for free by leaving it. The Afro-American have their issues with what I call Americanized tribalism and are completely dysfunctional in relating to each other. That is why they can't organize to save or redeem the group. On the other side of the ocean, those Africans are quite similar. They tend to separate and slaughter each other over various forms of tribalism and religion. Rebel forces kidnapping masses of children and governments massacring their own people. Just recently, Nigeria's military shot and killed protesters who were calling for the end of police brutality, and the world is now responding with hashtag movements. The Nigerian president and military opened fire on thousands of protesters, and this kind of thing happens across Africa non-stop for thousands of years. Very little white blood has ever been spilled in Africa. While African states, kingdoms, and empires have been colonized by Africans and Europeans, they used black Africans as their forces to suppress and kill millions of Africans. Today, Africa has a neo-colonial problem, which is white power and blackface. Everything from the borders, the economic systems, the rulers, and the constitutions are all created by white entities for white power. Everything about Nigeria, from its name, its borders, and economic system, was created for Europeans, by Europeans. A Nigerian brother asked me for help. I told him, our people are completely powerless, and the only thing that you can expect from us are hashtag slogans, gatherings, and maybe a march. We're also a reactionary people, and we're faced with a new crisis almost bi-weekly, so they'll move on to the next thing soon. At some point, our race has to begin being forward-thinking people and struggle for power 5, 10, or 50 years into the future. America has gasoline corporations with their own private armies, dozens of AFRICOM bases, UN militias, and Chinese forces bleeding and looting Africans dry, and white power and black faces selling the continent out while they get filthy rich. To protect their own interests, they're killing their own people. It is tragic what position that we're in and what kind of people that we've become. From what I've understood, some African politicians have tried to come together to solve their problems, but like the Afro-American, their ego gets in the way. And like the Afro-American, they beg whites and Asians to solve their problems. This is a 4,000-year pattern that ends the same way. Then there's the neo-colonial puppet politicians that get filthy rich selling out the wealth of their own country and making the people poorer. They have mostly Western systems in place that benefits European and American foreign policies, which is a nice term for imperialism. These things make Pan-Africanism pure nonsense. It is possible, however, that if the Afro-American unifies and organize themselves enough to become an economic power in America, that they can influence foreign policy against other Africans around the world, the way Jews do with Israel and vice versa.
Two factors together that are not equal, or factors that don't perceive themselves as being equal, you get a mess. That's why integration has caused us to lose a lot of black businesses, and also the dropout rate among blacks have increased in schools since we've had integration. You see, so once again, the conveniences, we're looking at conveniences rather than product, rather than really being truly liberated. So I believe that unless we pull ourselves aside as black folk, it'll never happen. But I'm hoping that it will happen. So I'm saying, black folk, please, let's come together.
What's the alternative? I mean, can you foresee genocide on black people?
I think history repeats itself unless there is something that's aggressive, that opposes the regular trend. Right after slavery, we thought that America was willing to open up for blacks. 20 years after slavery, they had Jim Crow laws that set blacks back to a slavery concept almost. We had Jim Crow laws, and that lasted for 100 years. The 60s, 100 years later, an exact 100 years later, we had the uprisings of the 60s. And once again, we thought that now white America and America is opening up to blacks. But now we see racism sticking its ugly head up again. And I think it's about to strike. And I think that unless black folks, see, the problem we made before is that we didn't have a black agenda right after slavery. We depended on America to do the right thing, but America did not do the right thing. And I think we are still depending on America to do the right thing. America's not going to do the right thing. We must make sure that the right thing is done. And we must focus on ourselves and the development and the building of ourselves. And if we don't, I can see very easily something similar to the Jim Crow laws happening here in America. Because after all, this is the same America who at the time of slavery epitomized freedom and also Christianity. And yet they were able to come up with that terrible system